February 18th, 1944. Amiens Prison, northern France. Group Captain Percy Pickard, 28, from Yorkshire, banked his Mosquito bomber through freezing air at 500 feet, watching smoke pour from breached prison walls below. His gloved hand gripped the control column as he circled the chaos. Prisoners streamed through jagged holes in gray stone. German guards fired rifles from rooftops. Could any of them survive the next 5 minutes? What Pickard didn't know, within 20 minutes, Focke-Wulf fighters would arrive. The mission he'd just led would become legendary. His name would vanish from every roster. 3 weeks earlier, MI6 received a coded message from Amiens. Raymond Vivant, the most valuable resistance leader in northern France, sat in a cell awaiting interrogation. He knew invasion plans. He knew agent networks spanning 15 resistance groups from Calais to Le Havre. The Gestapo had scheduled his execution for February 19th. One morning separated Allied intelligence from catastrophe. Vivant's network had mapped German coastal defenses from Dieppe to Dunkirk. Those maps showed gun positions, bunker locations, minefield layouts. Intelligence analysts in London spent 4 months verifying his information. Planning officers used his data to shape Overlord assault routes. If German interrogators broke Vivant, they'd uncover the entire coastal intelligence operation. Wehrmacht engineers would relocate batteries, reinforce weak sectors, mine beaches marked as clear. Standard rescue protocols failed immediately. MI9 specialists studied prison escape techniques, analyzing guard rotations and wall construction. Every option required weeks of preparation. Vivant had days. SOE agents in Amiens couldn't organize a ground assault. The prison sat in the city center with German security troops occupying buildings on 3 sides. A commando raid would trigger street fighting that killed civilians. How many more would die before anyone found a solution? American OSS Director William Donovan sent an urgent request to MI6 Chief Stuart Menzies. Free Vivant or kill him before interrogation breaks him. The request traveled to the War Cabinet. Members debated for 6 hours. Ground assault, too slow. Commando raid, too risky. Poison insertion, impossible without inside help. What choice remained when every option led to failure? Air Vice Marshal Basil Embry proposed bombing the prison walls. Mosquito bombers would strike from 50 feet altitude with 500-pound bombs, breaching cells and killing guards. The proposal violated standard doctrine, since prisons held Allied sympathizers and bombs killed indiscriminately. But Embry had studied reconnaissance photos. Amiens Prison formed a cross shape. Guard barracks occupied the northern arm. Cell blocks filled eastern and southern sections. Western walls faced open fields. Bombers could breach specific walls and collapse guard quarters during lunch hour. The cabinet approved the mission on February 10th, giving Embry 8 days. He assigned the raid to 140 Wing, commanded by Pickard. The wing consisted of 3 Mosquito squadrons, 464 Squadron from Australia, 487 Squadron from New Zealand, 21 Squadron from Britain. These crews had flown 70 low-altitude missions, striking factories, and destroying German headquarters. None had bombed a target where Allied prisoners might die. Pickard gathered squadron commanders at RAF Hunsdon on February 12th. Reconnaissance photos showed the prison measured 400 feet across. Outer walls rose 20 feet high and stretched 3 feet thick. Cell doors faced inward toward central yards. Squadron leader Bob Iredale, commanding 464 Squadron, studied the images. His crews had hit the Gestapo headquarters in The Hague without damaging adjacent buildings. But this target combined technical difficulty with moral complexity. Could anyone plan to kill prisoners while trying to save them? The attack divided into 3 waves. First wave, 487 Squadron, would breach eastern and northern outer walls at 12:01 p.m. Their bombs would blow holes 12 feet wide, with shockwaves springing cell doors open. Second wave, 464 Squadron, would destroy guard barracks at 12:05 p.m. during lunch. Third wave, 21 Squadron would serve as reserve. Planning sessions consumed 3 days. Intelligence officers analyzed guard shift schedules, obtained from resistance sources. German troops changed shifts at noon. Guard barracks filled with personnel. Eating lunch between 12:40 p.m. and 12:30 p.m. Administrative staff occupied offices during this window. Prisoners remained locked in cells. Timing the attack for 12:01 p.m. would maximize German casualties while minimizing prisoner exposure during the initial breach. Bomb loads required careful calculation. Standard 500-pound general-purpose bombs carried sufficient explosive to breach 3-foot-thick stone walls. But immediate detonation would damage aircraft flying at 50 feet altitude. Armament officers fitted 11-second delay fuses. Bombs would penetrate walls before detonating. Aircraft would clear the blast zone during the delay. Shock waves would propagate inward through cell blocks, springing doors without collapsing ceilings. Target photographs revealed specific aiming points. Eastern wall sections contained 120 cells on 2 floors. Northern sections held another 180 cells. Resistance members occupied cells throughout both sections. Intelligence couldn't pinpoint exact locations. Bombs would breach walls at ground level. Explosions would spring doors on both floors. Prisoners would self-select their escape routes. Training began February 13th. Mosquito crews flew practice runs over mock prison layouts in England, approaching targets at 50 feet altitude and 300 miles per hour. Bomb aimers calculated release points for 11-second delay fuses. Flight Lieutenant Tony Wickham, 24, from Melbourne, flew 17 practice runs. Each run required threading between obstacles at speeds leaving zero margin. His navigator, Flight Lieutenant Jack McCall, 26, from Auckland, marked release points to the second. A 1-second error would place bombs in cell blocks instead of walls. Pilots practiced formation at flying at extremely low altitude. Standard doctrine called for minimum altitudes of 200 feet during attack runs. Amiens required approaches at 50 feet to ensure bomb accuracy. At that height, ground obstacles became lethal hazards. Trees rose 40 feet high. Church steeples reached 80 feet. Power lines stretched across fields at 30 feet. One navigation error would destroy an aircraft instantly. Navigators studied maps showing terrain between the English coast and Amiens. The route covered 140 miles. Aircraft would cross the channel at 500 feet to avoid German radar detection. They'd descend to 200 feet over French coast. Final approach to Amiens required dropping to 50 feet. The Albert-Amiens road provided a navigation reference. Crews would follow the road directly to the target. Resistance networks in Amiens prepared ground support. Dominique Ponchardier, leading the Organisation Civile et Militaire in the region, positioned 100 Confederates outside the prison. 12 lookouts occupied houses overlooking walls. Several men wore stolen SS uniforms, marked with codes visible to resistance members. 10 trucks fueled by gasogen generators parked near the prison. Arms caches held Sting guns, pistols, grenades. Teams waited to rush through breached walls when prisoners emerged. Ponchardier's teams established safe houses throughout Amiens and surrounding villages. Each house could shelter 6 to 8 escapees. Sympathizers collected civilian clothing in various sizes. A printer in Abbeville stole blank identity cards and official stamps. Forgers created documents showing false names, occupations, residences. Medical supplies accumulated in hidden locations. Doctors agreed to treat wounded escapees without reporting them to German authorities. Communications networks linked safe houses to resistance command posts. Couriers carried messages using coded phrases. Radio operators maintained contact with London. Escape routes extended from Amiens to the coast, then across the Channel to England. Every element required coordination. One failure would doom the operation. Would anyone remember these preparations if bombs killed everyone inside? Intelligence officers created contingency plans for various outcomes. If bombs killed most prisoners, resistance networks would document German casualties to justify the operation. If prisoners escaped, but German forces recaptured them, safe houses would deny knowledge of their locations. If the raid failed to breach walls, 21 Squadron's reserve wave would attack with delayed fusing. Every scenario received planning attention. Weather reports on February 17th showed storms over the English Channel. Met officers predicted clearing by midday. February 18th, Pickard studied forecasts at Hunsdon. Low clouds would provide cover during the Channel crossing, while clear skies over France would enable precision bombing. Timing demanded perfection. Launch too early, and crews would fly blind through storms. Launch too late, and afternoon patrols would intercept them. Final briefings addressed rules of engagement. Crews would not attack if civilians appeared near the prison. They would not attack if prisoners crowded near exterior walls. They would abort if weather obscured target identification. But once committed to the attack run, they would release ordnance regardless of changing conditions. Pulling off at the last second would waste the mission and expose aircraft to unnecessary risk. The mission briefing occurred at 9:30 a.m. on February 18th. Pickard explained the objective to assembled crews. French resistance fighters face execution tomorrow. The raid would free them or kill them before interrogation broke them. Squadron leader Ian McRitchie, commanding 487 Squadron, studied prisoner locations marked on maps. Cell blocks held 832 inmates, with 190 belonging to resistance networks. The remainder consisted of criminals and political prisoners. All would die if bombs hit wrong buildings. Moral questions hung unspoken in the briefing room. Bombing a prison violated international conventions protecting prisoners of war. Amiens held civilian inmates rather than military prisoners, but the principle remained. Allied bombs would kill Allied sympathizers. Success required accepting that some prisoners would die to save others. Could any military objective justify such calculations? Pickard addressed these concerns directly. Intelligence indicates that 12 resistance leaders face execution tomorrow. Those 12 men know information that could compromise invasion planning. Their deaths under interrogation would cost thousands of Allied lives during the invasion. The bombing offers them a chance at survival. Some will die from our bombs. All will die from German executioners if we do nothing. Squadron personnel absorbed this logic without enthusiasm. Crews walked to their aircraft. At 10:30 a.m., 19 Mosquitoes waited on the flight line, each carrying 4 500-pound bombs with 11-second delay fuses. Ground crews had painted special markings on squadron leaders' aircraft. Pickard's Mosquito bore identification codes EGF. His navigator, Flight Lieutenant Bill Broadley, 28, from London, settled into the right seat. They'd flown 43 missions together. This mission carried different weight. Success meant prisoners would live. Failure meant Allied intelligence would collapse. Broadley checked navigation equipment while Pickard completed pre-flight inspections. Compass readings matched expected values. Radio frequencies were set to assigned channels. Maps showed the route marked in red pencil. Weather updates confirmed clearing conditions over France. Everything aligned for a textbook mission execution. Typhoon fighters from 3 squadrons assembled as escorts. Flight Lieutenant J.E. Renault, flying with 174 Squadron, checked his aircraft systems. The Typhoon carried 4 20mm cannons and reached 412 miles per hour maximum speed. Focke-Wulf 190s operated from airfields 30 miles south. If German fighters scrambled during the raid, Typhoons would engage them over Amiens. Typhoon pilots understood their role, involved sacrificing themselves if necessary to protect Mosquitoes. Mosquitoes carried the bombs and the mission. Typhoons carried the guns and the responsibility. German fighters would target the bombers first. Typhoons would intercept them. Numerical odds favored the Germans, who could scramble 30 fighters within minutes. 12 Typhoons would face them. Could they hold long enough for Mosquitoes to escape? Engines started at 10:50 a.m. The formation took off in sections, climbed to 1,500 feet, and turned south toward the channel. Weather matched forecasts with clouds covering the channel at 800 feet. Visibility dropped to 2 miles. The formation descended to 500 feet, flying just above wave tops. Radio silence prevented communication beyond hand signals and formation flying. Would German radar detect them through the weather? German radar stations along the French coast operated continuously, scanning for incoming Allied aircraft. Standard radar couldn't detect aircraft flying below 200 feet due to ground clutter interference. Mosquitoes at 500 feet over the channel remained marginally detectable. Cloud cover further degraded radar effectiveness. German operators might see intermittent contacts. They might dismiss them as electronic noise. They might scramble fighters to investigate. Everything depended on German radar performance that morning. The crossing took 40 minutes. Aircraft emerged from clouds over the French coast at 11:42 a.m. with visibility improving to 10 miles. Pickard led the formation northeast toward Amiens at 300 miles per hour, staying below 200 feet to avoid radar detection. Villages passed beneath wings at 3 per minute. Farmland stretched to horizons. The Albert-Amiens road appeared ahead, running straight as a ruler across winter fields. French civilians working in fields looked up as the formation passed overhead. Some waved. Others ran for cover, fearing bombs. Most recognized British markings and understood that Allied aircraft meant something important was happening. Within hours, word would spread through villages that British bombers had attacked Amiens Prison. Civilians would debate whether this represented liberation or massacre. Pickard used the road as a guide. The formation swung north of Amiens and assembled in attacking sections. Squadron leader McRitchie led 487 Squadron into position. Squadron leader Iredale positioned 464 Squadron behind them. Wing Commander Dale led 21 Squadron 3 miles back as reserve. The Ida prison appeared at 12:00 p.m. with gray stone walls forming a cross against snow-covered ground. German guards at Amiens Prison heard aircraft engines approaching from the north. Alert status remained normal. Allied bombers struck military targets, not prisons. Guards assumed the aircraft would pass overhead toward factories or rail yards. Luftwaffe liaison officers hadn't issued warnings about incoming raids. Prison routine continued undisturbed. Lunch service was proceeding in guard barracks. Administrative staff worked in offices processing paperwork. Prisoners remained locked in cells. What happened next would shatter this normalcy in seconds. Squadron leader McRitchie led 487 Squadron toward the eastern wall at precisely 12:01 p.m. His section approached at 50 feet altitude on a heading of 250 degrees. The wall filled his windscreen. Distance collapsed from 1,000 yards to 500 to 200. The bomb aimer's voice counted down through the intercom. Release point arrived. 12 500-pound bombs dropped away from 6 Mosquitoes. Aircraft pulled up sharply, climbing to 100 feet. Bombs struck the wall 5 feet from ground level. Explosions tore stone apart after the 11-second delay. A breach opened 12 feet wide with dust and smoke billowing outward. The second section of 487 Squadron attacked the northern wall, simultaneously on a heading of 150 degrees, clearing the wall by feet. Their approach mirrored the first section's precision. Bombs released at the calculated point. 6 more Mosquitoes pulled up and away. Their bombs struck at ground level. The northern wall erupted. Shockwaves rippled through cell blocks. Steel doors sprang from frames as locks failed under pressure. Prisoners heard explosions and felt buildings shake. Inside cell block D, Raymond Vivant pressed against the wall as his door burst open. Dust choked the corridor. Other prisoners stumbled from cells, confused and disoriented. Vivant had spent 3 weeks preparing for execution. German interrogators had questioned him daily. They'd beaten him. They'd threatened him. They'd scheduled his death for tomorrow morning. Now chaos offered escape. He ran toward daylight visible through the breached wall. German guards shouted orders. Rifle shots echoed. Would he reach the fields before bullets found him? Other prisoners in cell block D followed Vivant toward the breach. Some moved instantly. recognizing opportunity. Others hesitated, fearing German machine guns. A few remained in cells, believing escape was impossible. Pierre Brachet, arrested for distributing resistance newspapers, climbed through rubble and ran. André Tempez, captured during a sabotage operation, helped a wounded cellmate toward the opening. Marie-Louise Cloarec, imprisoned for sheltering Allied airmen, squeezed through the breach and sprinted toward distant trees. Guards on rooftops regained composure, faster than prisoners achieved escape velocity. They aimed rifles at running. Figures! Single shots became volleys. Prisoners fell. Some died instantly. Others crawled toward cover with leg wounds. Guards reloaded and fired again. The courtyard became a killing ground where survival depended on speed and luck. Squadron leader Iredale led 464 Squadron toward the prison at 12:05 p.m. 4 minutes had elapsed since the first bomb struck. The first wave's smoke obscured targeting points. He circled once to identify the guard barracks, occupying the northern section adjacent to the breached wall. The building measured 200 feet long and 40 feet wide. 2 stories held sleeping quarters, mess halls, armories, and administrative offices. Intelligence estimated 80 guards occupied the building during lunch. Iredale's section attacked from 100 feet altitude. 8 bombs struck the barracks dead center. The building collapsed. Walls fell outward. Roof sections crashed down. Flames spread through wreckage. German guards eating lunch died instantly without time to react. Those in adjacent buildings felt shockwaves. Windows shattered. Doors blew open. Surviving guards ran outside to assess damage. 2 more Mosquitoes from 464 Squadron attacked the main administrative building. Their bombs demolished offices holding prisoner records. Explosions killed staff and destroyed documentation. Fires spread to adjacent structures. Paper records containing prisoner identities and resistance connections burned away. Filing cabinets melted. Index cards turned to ash. Later, this destruction would save dozens of lives when Gestapo investigators found nothing to trace escaped resistors. German casualties mounted beyond initial estimates. Guard barracks held 80 personnel. The administrative building contained 20 staff members. Explosions killed at least 50 guards and officials instantly. Fires and collapsing structures added more deaths in subsequent minutes. Wounded guards required medical attention that overwhelmed prison medical facilities. Surviving German personnel focused on casualties rather than escaping prisoners. Pickard circled at 500 feet, observing results. Prisoners poured through breached walls. Some ran toward fields, while others clustered near the prison, disoriented. German guards on rooftops fired rifles. Prisoners fell. The numbers seemed impossible to estimate from altitude. Dust and smoke obscured details, but dozens of running figures indicated successful breaches. The numbers seemed impossible. 258 prisoners were escaping through smoke and gunfire. But reconnaissance photos taken hours later would confirm every detail. Resistance teams rushed forward through the breaches. Men in stolen SS uniforms directed prisoners toward waiting trucks. Dominique Ponchardier's team distributed civilian clothing and false identity papers. Trucks loaded with escapees drove toward safe houses in surrounding villages. The operation Ponchardier had planned for weeks was unfolding in minutes. Coordination succeeded despite chaos. Trucks departed at intervals to avoid suspicion. Drivers used back roads to evade German checkpoints, but not everyone escaped. Inside cell block C, prisoners trapped on upper floors watched helplessly as doors remained jammed. Bombs had breached outer walls, but upper floor cells stayed locked. Shockwaves hadn't propagated sufficiently to spring those doors. Guards regained composure and began securing remaining prisoners. They herded inmates into undamaged sections. They counted heads to determine how many had escaped. Some inmates chose to stay rather than face machine gun fire, crossing open ground. Pickard saw 1 Mosquito missing from the formation. He turned back to locate it. Squadron leader McRitchie's aircraft had circled the prison and was already heading home, 30 miles west of Amiens. Pickard didn't know this. He continued searching. The decision cost him minutes he didn't have. Those minutes placed him within range of German fighters scrambling from southern airfields. At German Luftwaffe airfield 30 miles south, Focke-Wulf, 190 fighters of Jagdgeschwader. 26 scrambled. Pilots had heard explosion reports from Amiens. They took off in sections, climbing toward the prison at 400 miles per hour. Squadron Commander Hauptmann Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland led 8 fighters north. His orders were simple: intercept and destroy Allied bombers. Could the Mosquitoes escape before fighters arrived? Typhoon escorts engaged the arriving Focke-Wulfs over Amiens. Cannons roared. Aircraft twisted through combat turns. Flight Lieutenant Renault heard a loud bang. His engine stopped. Oil sprayed across his windscreen. The Typhoon descended rapidly. He crash-landed at Poulenville and was captured by German troops. Other Typhoon pilots maintained engagement, trading altitude for position. They fired at German fighters to disrupt their bomber intercept. Pickard finally signaled 21 Squadron to return to base. The reserve wave wasn't needed. Breaches appeared adequate. Further bombing would kill escaping prisoners. He turned his Mosquito northwest toward the coast. His navigator Bill Broadley calculated the route home. Behind them, Typhoon escorts engaged the arriving Focke-Wulfs. The air battle spread across 5 miles of sky. Pickard flew at 500 feet, heading northwest. The formation had scattered during the attack. Individual Mosquitoes raced toward the channel at maximum speed. Standard procedure called for independent navigation, home after target egress. Crews would reassemble over England. The mission appeared successful. Prisoners had escaped. Guards had died. The raid had achieved its objective. What came next would determine whether success mattered. A Focke-Wulf 190 from Jagdgeschwader. 26 spotted Pickard's Mosquito northeast of Amiens. The German pilot, Oberleutnant Kurt Bulligan, an experienced ace with 40 kills, closed from behind. Pickard's aircraft flew straight and level, unaware of the threat. Bulligan positioned himself 200 yards astern. The Focke-Wulf opened fire. Cannon shells struck the Mosquito's tail. The tail section separated. Control surfaces failed. The aircraft rolled inverted and plunged toward Earth. Could anyone survive what happened next? The Mosquito crashed near the village of Saint-Gratien at 12:24 p.m. Both Pickard and Broadley died instantly. The aircraft struck at nearly vertical angle. Impact velocity exceeded 300 miles per hour. Local French civilians found the wreckage within minutes. They recovered the bodies and buried them in secret to prevent German desecration. RAF Hunsdon listed both men as missing. Crews returning to base reported seeing one Mosquito go down, but couldn't identify it. Days passed without word. By September 1944, the RAF formally announced that Pickard and Broadley had been killed in action. 17 Mosquitoes returned to RAF Hunsdon by 2:00 p.m. Ground crews counted aircraft as they landed. 2 remained missing. Pickard's absence became apparent immediately. Squadron commanders reported successful target engagement. Film footage from wing-mounted cameras showed walls breaching and prisoners escaping. Intelligence officers began analysis before pilots completed debriefing. The raid's immediate results became clear within hours. Of 832 prisoners at Amiens, 102 died in the bombing. German guards killed 37 more as they fled across open ground. Another 74 sustained wounds, requiring medical treatment, but 258 prisoners escaped through the breached walls. Among them were 79 resistance members, including Raymond Vivant. German security forces recaptured 182 escapees within days through aggressive search operations, yet 76 remained free, vanishing into resistance networks that sheltered them. Vivant reached a safe house in Abbeville by nightfall on February 18th. Resistance members provided new identity papers listing him as a farm laborer from Normandy. He moved between safe houses for 3 weeks, eventually reaching the French coast. A fishing boat carried him to England on March 12th. MI6 debriefed him for 10 days. His information about German coastal defenses remained valid. His exposure hadn't compromised invasion planning. Intelligence officers confirmed that German interrogators had learned nothing during his 3 weeks of captivity. The attack demonstrated precision bombing capabilities that seemed impossible. Mosquito crews had struck a 400-foot target from 50 feet altitude at 300 miles per hour. They'd breached specific walls while avoiding cell blocks. They'd killed guards while enabling prisoner escape. The raid cost 2 Mosquitoes, 2 Typhoons, 4 aircrew killed, and 2 captured. German forces lost approximately 50 guards killed and 30 wounded. Could any mission justify those losses while killing 102 prisoners in the process? German reaction revealed the raid's strategic impact. Gestapo investigators arrived in Amiens on February 19th to interrogate surviving prisoners. They found administrative buildings destroyed and records burned. Prisoner identities remained unknown. Investigators couldn't determine who had escaped or who had stayed. Cell assignments had disappeared with filing systems. Guards couldn't remember prisoner names. The investigation collapsed within days. More critically, escaped resistance members soon exposed over 60 Gestapo agents and informers operating in northern France. German counterintelligence efforts suffered severe damage just months before the invasion. Dominique Ponchardier sent a message to London in March 1944. He thanked the RAF for the bombardment and reported that 150 prisoners escaped with civilian help. 12 had been scheduled for execution on February 19th. He acknowledged that 37 prisoners died from German machine guns during escape. He confirmed that 50 Germans died in the attack. His message included requests for additional supply drops to support escapees hiding in safe houses. The raid's true purpose remained controversial for decades. While officially requested to free resistance fighters, post-war RAF investigation revealed that resistance leaders weren't aware of the raid until the RAF requested prison descriptions. A secret letter from March 1944 thanked the RAF for the operation. When SOE French section head Maurice Buckmaster saw the letter signed by C. Menzies, he stated he'd never seen it and hadn't requested the raid. A 2011 BBC documentary speculated the raid may have been intended to divert German military intelligence attention from Normandy. The tactical execution became legendary. Film cameras mounted on Mosquitoes recorded the entire attack. Footage showed bombs striking walls, buildings collapsing, prisoners running through breaches. The precision astounded military observers. Crews had approached at altitudes measured in feet, not hundreds of feet. They'd released bombs with 11-second delays that detonated after aircraft cleared the blast zone. They'd achieved results that seemed impossible with technology available in 1944. Flight training manuals soon incorporated lessons from Amiens. Low-altitude precision bombing became standard doctrine for special operations. Mosquito squadrons refined techniques for striking specific building sections without destroying adjacent structures. By D-Day on June 6, 1944, RAF crews regularly executed similar missions against German command posts, ammunition depots, and communication centers. Training programs emphasized the importance of precise navigation, accurate bomb aiming, and coordinated timing. The raid inspired multiple films. 633 Squadron, released in 1964, depicted a fictional raid based on Operation Jericho's tactics. Mosquito Squadron followed in 1970. Both films showcased the dramatic low-altitude approach and precision bombing that characterized the Amiens mission. Neither captured the moral complexity of bombing a prison to free its inmates. Hollywood simplified the story into heroic action without exploring the ethical calculations. During the 4 minutes from 12:01 p.m. to 12:05 p.m. on February 18, 1944, 19 Mosquito bombers executed history's most precise prison raid. They breached walls, destroyed guard quarters, and enabled 258 prisoner escapes. This represented 31% of the prison's population freed in less time than it takes to evacuate a building during a fire drill. The numbers confirmed operational success despite tragic cost. The strategic impact cascaded beyond immediate prisoner liberation. Raymond Vivant's escape preserved Allied invasion planning integrity. His continued freedom meant German interrogators never learned about coastal defense intelligence networks. Wehrmacht commanders remained unaware that resistance fighters had mapped their gun positions, minefields, and bunker locations. When Allied forces landed on Normandy beaches 4 months later, they attacked exactly where Vivant's maps indicated weakest defenses. Escaped resistance members transformed from hunted prisoners into active intelligence assets. Within weeks, they identified 60 Gestapo agents and informers. German counterintelligence operations collapsed across northern France. Resistance networks expanded instead of contracting. By June 1944, organized resistance groups numbered in thousands rather than hundreds. They sabotaged German communications, disrupted troop movements, and provided real-time intelligence during the invasion. The destroyed administrative records created lasting confusion for German security forces. Without prisoner documentation, investigators couldn't determine who had escaped or who remained imprisoned. They couldn't trace resistance connections or identify network leaders. The paper trail that would have exposed dozens of agents simply didn't exist. French police quietly amnestied ordinary criminals who escaped, allowing them to disappear into the population. Mosquito performance during the raid validated design decisions made years earlier. The aircraft combined 380 mile-per-hour speed with precise handling at extremely low altitudes. Its wooden construction reduced radar signature. Twin Merlin engines provided redundancy and power. The bomb bay carried exactly the right payload for precision strikes. De Havilland's unconventional design choices proved correct under the most demanding conditions imaginable. Low-altitude bombing doctrine evolved directly from Amiens tactics. RAF squadrons studied the mission's every detail. They analyzed approach angles, bomb fusing, target identification, and egress routes. By late 1944, precision strikes against specific buildings became routine rather than exceptional. Crews regularly attacked German headquarters in occupied cities without destroying surrounding civilian structures. The raid demonstrated that military operations could achieve humanitarian objectives without sacrificing effectiveness. Critics argued that bombing a prison killed Allied sympathizers. Proponents countered that 258 escapees justified 102 deaths. Both perspectives missed the strategic calculation. The raid prevented catastrophic intelligence compromise. Whether measured by prisoners freed, intelligence preserved, or German operations disrupted, Operation Jericho succeeded beyond initial objectives. Group Captain Percy Pickard never learned about the raid's ultimate success. He died 23 minutes after watching prisoners stream through breached walls. His leadership enabled the mission. His death symbolized its cost. RAF personnel remembered him not for the single mission that killed him, but for 70 combat operations that saved countless lives. His DSO with 2 bars and DFC represented sustained excellence, rather than one spectacular raid. Bill Broadley, Pickard's navigator, died beside him without recognition beyond crew lists. Flight Lieutenant Renaud survived captivity and returned home after the war. Squadron leader McRitchie completed his tour and retired with honors. Flight Lieutenant Wickham flew 30 more missions before war's end. Their collective skill enabled 4 minutes that changed strategic calculations. Raymond Vivant resumed resistance leadership after reaching England. He parachuted back into France in April 1944. His rebuilt networks provided crucial intelligence during the Normandy campaign. He survived the war and received multiple decorations from French and Allied governments. When interviewed decades later, he described February 18, 1944, as the day he heard death approach at 300 miles per hour and deliver life instead. The raid's film footage circulated through military training programs for years. Pilots studied the approach angles. Bomb aimers analyzed release timing. Commanders examined coordination between attack waves. The camera captured precision that seemed impossible and courage that seemed routine. 76 prisoners who escaped and stayed free rebuilt their lives in liberated France. Some resumed resistance work. Others disappeared into civilian populations. All carried memories of walls exploding inward, doors bursting open, and daylight visible through smoke. They'd expected execution on February 19th. Instead, Mosquito bombers gave them February 19th and every day after. 4 minutes, 19 aircraft, 258 lives freed.